What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast that is a proud partner of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I am your host, Numac, coming back at you with another episode of Talk of the Tundra. Getting ready for the playoffs. Packers are in it against the Philadelphia Eagles, traveling to Philly as the 7 seed, facing off against the 2 seed. A bit of a deja vu from last year as they are a 7 seed going on the road to the NFC East 2 seed in a juggernaut and a good defensive team and and all of that. So here's to hoping they can replicate some success, and here to walk us through how that just might happen, along with me obviously, is my lovely co-host Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
Hello, hello. Bracing for the playoffs. Tradition like any other. Unlike any other. That's what it's supposed to be. It's a tradition like any other.
Yeah, it's also the wrong sport.
Doesn't matter.
Mister.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, Jim Nance
Jim Nance.
calling the Masters.
I'm going to give my tie to the winning college basketball player on in the Final Four. Did you know that? That's what he would do.
You do what?
Whoever won the national championship for college basketball, the game that he would announce, he would give his tie that he was wearing to the player he deemed as like the most valuable player.
That's actually like pretty cool. It's
No, it's not.
I
What are
think
you
it is.
talking about?
As a guy who appreciates Jim Nance and all of the iconic broadcasters, I think that's pretty cool. I think
You know what it
the players probably don't think it's as cool as it is in the moment, like compared to like winning the title. But I bet you like down the line, they think it's pretty cool.
you know what speaks to me.
What does it speak to you?
It speaks to me that Jim Nance is trying to make the moment about himself. It's like who gives a crap about your Brooks Brothers tie?
I would have.
Keep it on, you
I bet
jackass.
you it's way nicer than Brooks Brothers. Uh, Getting back to football, I forgot that we probably have to give out cheeses.
Oh crap. Yeah.
And I don't know
Ugh.
who even deserves one.
I protest.
We can't
No,
protest. There's got to be
I
one.
know. Um,
You look at the box score quick. Emmanuel Wilson, 14 carries, 73 yards on a touchdown.
he's got it.
He can get one.
Um, who
Uh,
else? Cooper?
oh, uh, he led the team in tackles, no sacks, tackle for a loss. Um, Rashawn Gary had a sack.
Ooh, what about Keyshawn?
Keyshawn had two tackles for a loss and an interception. No, he had I think a fumble recovery, or did he force a fumble? I think he
Let me
forced.
look this
I
up.
think he forced the fumble, right?
Um, no.
No.
Carrington Valentine did.
Mm. Mm. Then Keyshawn recovered it.
Why don't they have Javon Bullard recovered a fumble and Edrin Cooper recovered a fumble?
Mm. I think
So
there
did
was two, weren't there?
there was two, yes, but I think it was the same thing with
One
what happened
was
last week.
DJ Moore. I
I think
can't.
what happened, it was also whoever it was Xavier McKinney fumbled the pick and they had to fall on top of it.
That happened again.
I think so.
Oh my god.
Oh, oh my God. Edgar Cooper was the highest rated PFF defender.
Uh,
BT Dubs.
let's do Emmanuel Wilson, Edrin Cooper, and who forced the fumble?
Carrington Valentine.
Let's give it to him
Okay.
because I think that's honestly like the. Oh,
That's about, yeah.
yeah, you guys can yell at us if you think it should have been somebody else, but I these cheeses are under protest.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Yeah, because
Carrington Valentine.
Edrin Cooper and Emmanuel Wilson.
Okay.
So, alrighty, let's hop right into this Philadelphia Eagles game, the playoff game, obviously. Uh, I think let's start, Jordan, with going over what this game looked like in the beginning of the year, just as a refresher for everybody. Uh, Packers lose the opening game of the year in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles, 34-29. Uh, Saquon Barkley is the star of the game. He scores 3 touchdowns, including 2 on the ground to go with 24 carries and 109 yards, as well as excuse me, um, 23 yards through the air on 2 catches and that wheel route touchdown. Jalen Hurts throws 2 interceptions, but also throws 2 TDs, the other of which going to AJ Brown, who had 5 catches for 119 yards and that touchdown. The long one being that 67-yard bomb that he scored the touchdown on, I believe. Packers do a good job holding Jalen Hurts uh, into the pocket. He had 13 carries for 33 yards, which is good for them. And then the defense kind of was the big thing. They forced 3 turnovers, like I said, 2 interceptions of Jalen Hurts, and they recovered a fumble, I believe, by Saquon, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check that. Um, that here, if I can find it. Yeah, Saquon, or no, yeah, Jalen Hurts also fumbled the ball. Saquon recovered one that I think that he muffed on a direct snap or something like that. So, for all intents and purposes, a close game. The game uh, comes down to the final seconds where they're driving the field and Jordan Love ends up hurting his knee. He goes down, obviously is then out for 2 weeks, and in comes Malik Willis, who is in for, I believe, 2 plays. He gets sacked on the first one and then throws an incomplete pass on the second one, if I'm not mistaken. Is how that game ends. So, um, sorry, all the way around. Incomplete first and then sacked on the final play of the game. End up losing by 5 points on what should have been a pretty winnable game had Jordan Love probably stayed in and not had gotten hurt. Um, but alas, still a loss to one of the best teams in the NFL, and I think sort of sets the stage for what could be a redemption story for the Packers this entire postseason. Right? They're gonna need to go through, if they win, at least 2 of their former losses, probably 3, uh, if the Vikings make it all the way. But if they win this week, they go to Detroit, and so this could be the redemption arc, if we want to be storybook about it, for the Packers to reclaim their season and go on and do something pretty special. So, looking at that now, I guess, do you want to get right into the injury report, Jordan, or do you want to say anything about sort of the Eagles' season as we've seen them thus far, since we've seen them, or should we do that later?
Um, we could do the season now. I mean, part of it is like for a team that was so fractured and lose key leaders like Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, like there's a lot of upheaval. And obviously some of that spilled over into weird storylines throughout this year, like the AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts thing that they had to like squash. And Nick Sirianni is always just going to have a lot of high pressure around him, whether you think he's a good coach or not. Like he's just
He gave the
that's kind of
finger
the
to
environment.
fans, right, at some
Yeah,
point
he
this season.
gave the finger to fans and
It
whatever.
was a drama-filled, successful season for the Eagles. They went 14-3.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty darn good season. Um, 2 of their losses coming in their first 4 games. They then go on a what would be a 10-game winning streak, only to lose to the Commanders at the very last second in a game at which Jalen Hurts goes out with a concussion, something he's still dealing with, and then win their next 2 games against the Cowboys and Giants to end the season. So yeah, it's been a weird season for the Eagles. Like I feel like this might be the textbook season for winning fixes everything. Because if they weren't winning, I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of this could have spiraled. But they
Yeah.
have an, 2 MVP candidates, one guy who could have broke Eric Dickerson's rushing record last week in Saquon Barkley, and just talent all around. Like it's being held together by wins, which is what you want it to happen. Obviously, you want good culture in that too, obviously. But if you're gonna do it one way, being feisty and tenacious while winning, probably isn't a bad way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a very well balanced, well built team after undergoing or suffering, a humiliating collapse last year.
Yeah,
You know, that should have been a Super Bowl. They should have quite honestly been to two straight Super Bowls, but for a lot of chemistry reasons and things just kind of fading as the year went along. Like the constant is kind of chatter and you know, it's a place that doesn't um tolerate losing for very long. You know,
right.
look at Doug Peterson brings the franchise their first Super Bowl ever and
Yeah,
is out within 2 years after that. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I think the Saquon element of it all is the big key.
yeah.
Is that they're legitimately like you can make if it's not him. There's deserving MVP candidates, but someone that just came into that building and just kind of reinvigorated everything.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
for
sometimes
sure.
you just need that juice from outside
Yep.
to kind of put everything back together.
Hmm. I think like in contrast to last year, this team is just so different. I guess their season just went so much differently. They started 10-1 last year, only losing to the Jets of all teams in week 6. And then after going 10-1, they proceed to lose 5 of their last 6 to finish 11-6.
Yeah.
As opposed to this year, like I just said, they went 2-2 just in their first 4 weeks, ring off 10 straight, and the only reason they lose the Commanders game most likely is because Jalen Hurts goes out in like the first quarter with a concussion because they
Yep.
they were winning that game up until 2 seconds left in the game. So just a really good year from the Eagles, and they're gonna keep bringing it on Sunday. And so let's get into that preview of Sunday right now. Injury report for the week for the Packers. Uh, Zane Anderson dealing with his concussion. He was a DMP both Wednesday and Thursday. Javon Bullard, Edrin Cooper, Brenton Cox Jr., and Andre Dillard were all limited, each with dealing with an ankle. Javon Bullard with his ankle, Edrin Cooper with his knee and an illness, Brenton Cox's foot, and Andre Dillard's concussion. Romeo Dobbs, coming off that illness last week, was a full participant in both days of practice. Saw some comments from him that he's just happy to be breathing because I guess it was pretty nasty. And I'm guessing that's just what's going around right now, which is just probably a no good, very bad case of the flu. So glad he's back, right? Uh, Notably, the quarterbacks Jordan Love and Malik Willis are both full participants in practice today, each dealing with injuries on their throwing arms, the elbow for Jordan Love and the right thumb for Malik Willis. Uh, Defensive lineman TJ Slayton was a DMP on Wednesday, but was upgraded to limited on Thursday with an ankle injury. Quay Walker was limited both days with his ankle injury that is still looming. Obviously, Christian Watson DMP because of his torn ACL and other ligament injuries in his knee. And then safety Evan Williams, still dealing with his quad, was limited both days. Um, Matt LaFleur yesterday and today didn't really give much into if Quay and Evan Williams would play. Quay Walker and Evan Williams would play. Basically, just like if Quay plays, they'll loop him in as much as they can, kind of thing. Evan Williams, I think, was a little more. He was a little more like not wordsy with, but I think Quay, he like,
Guarded.
yeah, with Quay, I remember him saying that like he'll play as much as he can, kind of thing. But with Evan Williams being a rookie and just everything that comes with being a rookie and playing the playoffs, that if he's healthy, he might play a little bit, but not as much as you might think, given his role in the regular season. Um, for the Eagles, they have an equally long injury report. Notably, AJ Brown, their star wide receiver, is dealing with a knee injury he's been hampered with the past several weeks. He was limited on Wednesday, but was a DMP on Thursday. Um, Part of his designation was rest, and Jeff McClain, a Philadelphia Eagles reporter, uh, tweeted this afternoon that he was not at practice and that he was. It was suggested that he left the practice early on Wednesday, and then obviously sat today, and then he uh, expanded upon his point, saying that the expectation is that AJ Brown will play on Sunday, from what I understand. He's obviously dealing with a knee issue and will receive maintenance. So take that how you may.
Yeah.
Just he might play, he might not. It's a knee injury. Take it for what you will. Um, Tight end Grant Calaterra dealing with a shoulder injury. He was a full participant both days, as was linebacker N'Kobe Dean dealing with his abdomen injury. Tight end, or not, sorry, tackle, offensive lineman, my apologies. Jack Driscoll was not on the report Wednesday, but has an ankle injury as of Thursday. He was limited in practice. Dallas Goddard, full participant both days, dealing with a knee injury. Defensive end Bryce Huff with a wrist injury. He was a full participant both days. Star quarterback Jalen Hurts is still dealing with the concussion that he suffered against the Commanders a few weeks ago, as well as a left finger injury. He was limited on Wednesday, a full participant on Thursday. Uh, I'd say pointing to that he's most likely good to go for this week. Still needs to clear concussion protocol. Just because he's a full participant doesn't mean that um, he will be cleared. This happened with Romeo Dobbs a couple weeks ago with the Packers, where he was a full participant both Thursday and Friday and was not cleared. So, not to be that guy, but we can hold out hope that he might not play. Uh, Tackle Lane Johnson, not due to the injuries. He was limited on Thursday, just a rest designation. Their guard, Trevor Keegan, has an illness. He was a DMP both days. Kenny Pickett, their backup quarterback, is dealing with a rib injury. He was limited both days. Running back Will Shipley has an ankle injury. He was limited both days. And then defensive tackle Byron Young is dealing with a hamstring injury, and he was a full participant both days. So, with all that being said, lots of history between these two teams, at least since the turn of the century. Jordan recounted pre-pod and name dropped Freddie Mitchell, who I had to be told who that was, notably the 4th and 26 uh, reception guy. What was that? 2003, 4. That was my guess, and then I
Or
went back too early. So obviously that, and then uh, Packers go into Philly in 2010 and beat down Michael Vick and that Eagles team en route to the Super Bowl in the wild card round. And then
also,
go ahead.
also, quite notably, the Eagles are the only team to beat Vince Lombardi in a playoff game.
Oh, I did not know
Hmm
that.
Famous quote from that was from the NFC Championship game loss was, "We're not going to be beaten again." Essentially, like, remember this feeling because you won't lose again in the playoffs as long as I'm here, kind of thing.
Right. And he was right.
Yeah, that was his own like secret.
Yeah. And then I don't think they've faced in the playoffs since that Super Bowl run, right? I think that's really it.
No, 3 games, 1 and 2 against them in the playoffs.
Mm. I thought it would have been more than that, but alas. Then obviously recent history they faced earlier this year that we had just talked about, and then 2 years ago is when Jordan Love made his brief cameo against the Eagles
It's
in
true.
in Philadelphia and had that long touchdown to Christian Watson. That kind of got all of us a little excited for what would be becoming very soon. So, uh, I guess let's get into it, Jordan. Where do you want to start? What side of the ball do you want to start on? For either team, and we can obviously talk about their opponent across the ball with them. So you want to do
I I think we do offense. I think we do passing offense for the Packers,
okay?
especially in light of Christian Watson,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Christian Watson, as I'm sure all of you know by now, uh, tore his ACL on Sunday against the Bears. Not ideal whatsoever. Um, really changes the dynamic of their offense. And before we get into the thing, I want to mention again, um, not mention again, but mention that another news item I saw. Packers sending Marshawn Lloyd down to UW Madison to do the same treatment that Christian Watson did for his hamstring. Um, because after his appendectomy, I can probably a month and a half or so ago, whenever that was, like November-ish time.
Mm.
Um, After his appendectomy, he suffered another setback um, with his hamstring, and so that's why we haven't seen him all this season. not because of his appendectomy, which I guess I should say not because that could be a part of it, but in part because of his appendectomy and because he had a setback with his hamstring that has just not allowed him to play. So hopefully he has as much success as Christian Watson had this year, coming back from those hamstring injuries. And unfortunately, Christian Watson getting hurt other ways that not doesn't have to do with the hamstring, but those hamstrings held up this year. So again, here's to hoping. So, but Christian Watson obviously done for the season. Done for probably a good part of early part of next season as well. Their offense changes significantly with with this uh, with this news. Don't have the deep threat as much as you'd like. Like Bull Melton might be able to fill in that role. He's fastest guy in the team, if not mistaken, and
It's probably gonna be Wicks more than anybody. And
probably. But I think Bull Melton's probably gonna get a good percent of the snaps as well, just because he is a speedster,
yeah,
and so uh but Christian Watson led the team in deep throws, 20 yards or more with 15. So that's a big target down the field missing. And we talked about it with the Bears game last week that this passing offense, hasn't really looked that good in the past 3 weeks or so of football. And I'd say Christian Watson was a part of that. He didn't really do much of anything since I think the Seattle game. And
yeah.
so, and even then against, I think it was the Niners, he had the long bomb that he dropped that hit him right in the hands. And that's not really a process problem. It's just a drop, but
Yeah.
it's uh, a small symptom of just the offense not clicking as well as it should, kind of thing. And so I'm with you. I think this passing offense is going to need to be working and need to be like firing on every single cylinder they have, because this Eagles defense is damn good. They have two standout uh, DBs, one of which is I'm sorry, two of which are rookies in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Cooper DeJean,
Yep.
my beloved, absolutely balling. Like who could have seen it coming, Jordan?
Who could? Yeah, exactly.
Who could have predicted this? Certainly not a 6'2" handsome Packers podcaster. But
Andy Herman?
is Andy tall? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I've never even talked to this guy, but he's great.
Um,
You also worth mentioning, the Eagles allow the lowest average of opponent passing yards per game.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're a really good defense. They've allowed 500 fewer yards than the next closest defense, which is the Titans. They've allowed 47 or
did you
4,000.
say the Titans?
Titans are the next defense in yards allowed.
That is not who I thought that was going to be. Holy
It's
cow.
it's
That's weird.
it's Eagles one at like 47-52 or something, and then the next closest is the Titans at like 40 or 52-90 or something. Like it's not
Sounds like a
close.
team that should have fired their GM.
Yeah, probably. That's a whole different story.
Sorry, sorry.
No, you're good. It's just the talk about not a good franchise.
Yeah.
I do want to get these numbers right because I think it's incredible. Yeah, 47-32 total yards allowed for the Eagles and 52-91 the Titans. The top five in total yards allowed defense is actually crazy. It's the Eagles, the Titans, and then this is crazy, Jordan. The Jets, the Dolphins, and then fifth on this list is the Packers.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And you look at like a team like the Lions are. Why can't I find the Lions? 20th with 5,800 yards. Holy moly, that's actually crazy. With that
Yeah.
realization, there's as many yards between the Eagles and the Titans than there is between the Titans and the Vikings at 16.
Yeah. So there you go. It turns out Vic Fangio he still got it.
Turns out he's still got it. They have yeah, fewest amount of yards passing allowed as well, and 13 interceptions to go with it. They're really good in pass
Yeah,
defense.
yeah, yeah. And it's again, I think Christian Watson's injury just kind of it just illuminates just how much disarray that the wide receiver core is in. I was listening around to various football podcasts throughout the week because obviously I'm a football podcaster. And I just wanted to hear more kind of national perspective of things. I thought Mina Kimes, unsurprisingly, her and Dominique Foxworth of ESPN broke down really well of like Packers wide receiver core. It's like we talk so much about there's not a true number one, but you have this plethora of options. And at the start of last year, we were always kind of just like up in arms about who's that number one, who's the number one. Then it trends upward. You know what I mean? Like the tide gets a little higher, everybody's profiting, everybody's eating, and we're like, yeah, this can work. This committee can work. And then it starts really great at the start of the year, and yeah, there's some drama, Romeo Dobbs injuries, kind of thing. But now it's just it's gone down, and it's unavoidable. And despite being experienced, I think part of that kind of complicates the problem of where the Packers are going into this game is that they have done this before. They were the seventh seed. They won a playoff game. They defied expectations, but they played like a team that had nothing to lose this time last year. And this time, it's like, no, you can't really. I don't think they can conjure back that feeling back up again. Yeah, I mean, it is different. There are expectations of getting farther than where they were last year, or even just winning another playoff game where they were last year. Like that's where I think overall that's not just about the passing offense; it's about the team overall. But I think that's the biggest underlying problem facing them that you can't run away from going into this game, especially now without your biggest downfield threat. Like, what does it look like? Who's gonna? Is it? We mentioned Dontavia Wicks, Bo Melton. Who's really gonna step up for this team for to just make things better for Jordan Love? I think that's ultimately the biggest thing is that someone steps up and is turns in like a Romeo Dobbs like performance against Dallas. I think that makes things easier for Jordan Love. But if he's searching for guys that he wants to get the ball to and it's not working, then it could be a long, long afternoon. You're muted.
I was unmuted and then I muted to talk. So love how that works. No, I totally agree because they need to they need to conjure that feeling. I don't think it's there. Last year they were the young team that no one expected to be there, going in with like you said nothing to lose. Expectations are a lot different, I would assume, in the locker room as well as amongst fans as to what they were hoping to do this year, and going 0 for 3 at home against a division rival and 0 for 3 again against the top 3 record teams in the I'm sorry, 0 for 5 against the top 3 record teams
Yep.
in the NFL or in the NFC isn't good. Like they haven't beat the best teams in the NFC that they're going to need to beat to get to the Super Bowl, and that expectation going into this playoffs, I think, is much different. Matt LaFleur talked about like just how they never played 4 good quarters of football, and they have to be able to do that. Like
Mm,
I think he knows that if they play 4 good quarters against any team, they're one of the best teams in football. But we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen it for mere halves at some point. And so
yeah.
I'm with you. It makes this matchup a lot more difficult to to get by if you're not at full strength on offense, especially with the type of player that Christian Watson was. Like drops or no drops or just
He's
efficiency or whatever. The threat of Christian Watson is as valuable as his ability to make plays on the ball.
it is the easiest. Like I think. Uh, Sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts in like a way that people can actually understand what I'm trying to say. But the whole conversation about Christian Watson, it just feels like, yeah, it there's the injury element of it. There's the personal side of it. It's like, yes, there are real things that are concerning. It's like he's going into a contract a year next year. How much he plays next year, what he looks like after that, could very well affect what he makes in his second contract. It could
Yeah.
very well affect his future in Green Bay. That's over here. When we're talking about like in the present, in the now, how this offense is constructed, it's like, yeah, even if he's not completing, if he's dropping passes or he's quiet or we all the breakout kind of buzz that we kind of expected from him coming out of his rookie year and it never really materializing outside of a few games here or there. It's still like they don't have someone that can do what he does. And that's why there's always been the hope that he's going to be healthy, that he's going to be a productive player, that he could be, this not complete wide receiver because I think it's very, we weren't there yet with him, but it's the hardest thing to replicate on the football field. Someone who stretches the field, someone who commands so much attention that when you don't have that, it's like that's where like the shell game can really come in terms of how a defense looks at this offense.
Hmm.
They can look at Jaden Reed and be like, well, his bread and butter is kind of behind the line of scrimmage, kind of playing finesse game. Romeo Dobbs is kind of the more possession based wide receiver. Dontavian Wicks, ups and downs. Who knows if we
Can be
get an
relied
up
on.
game kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's where you're opening more uncertainty for this wide receiver core to kind of coalesce and fix the things that have clearly been ailing everybody on the field so far.
Yeah. And that's all to say, like, Jaden Reed had a really big catch against the Eagles. Big, long touchdown. Like, really long one. Uh, Wicks has had his moments this year. Dobbs is really good on the sideline and some clutch catches when he needs them. But it's never been consistent with these guys this year. And you look at a secondary like the Eagles have with Quinyon Mitchell, C.J. Gardner Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Darius Slay Jr., and Cooper DeJean as the nickel guy. Those are five really talented dudes.
Yep.
Like five absolute dogs in the secondary. Like this defense is insane. We'll talk about their uh, the guys in the trenches in a little bit, but geez Louise, like it's you just gotta hope that Matt LaFleur and Adam Stenavich have a good game plan coming into this, and hopefully that it's something different than what they tried in Brazil against the Eagles. Because I think this team is vastly different. I think both teams are vastly different in how they approach offense and how the Eagles approach defense than they were 18 weeks ago. And so it ultimately it all falls with Jordan Love. I shouldn't say all, but a good portion of this falls on Jordan Love being able to execute the game and being the game plan and being able to make good throws and really start driving the ball into guys' chests to where they have a chance to make a play. If Jordan Love plays like he has played the past month and where he's not hitting guys square up and guys have to go down and try and get the ball off the grass or it's thrown over their heads, they don't stand a chance. But
Yep.
if Jordan Love is good and he's looks like prime Jordan Love that we've come to know and pun intended love, they have a good shot. But it's gonna need a special performance to get past this Eagle secondary.
I mean, it's got to be something that we haven't seen since what, Miami, San Francisco,
Yeah.
a little bit of Seattle, like, but again, I think part of the difference where the Packers were at last year going into the wild card weekend and this year is that there's always this undercurrent that the Cowboys were kind of this house of cards team. Like they were a team that really relied. I mean, Deron Bland just was kind of the emphasis or the epitome of this was guy that what had six pick sixes in the season, had like 10 interceptions, but they gave up big plays. Like they were very susceptible outside of like making those, you know, game flipping plays that they still like weren't a perfect team. They were a defense that could be exploited, and the Packers knew how to exploit that. Now, I think the biggest thing for Matt LaFleur and coming into this game and trying to hatch a game plan that really breaks up the Eagles defense. It's like, where's the weakness? Especially passing wise. Like
Yeah,
that's the thing is like you have the secondary, you have certainly someone that has gotten under the skin of many head coaches for quite a while with Vic Fangio as a defensive mind. Sometimes like the scheme and personnel that's too overwhelming to overcome. But we'll just see. I think the thing for me is that so much of the Packers offense and how we talk about it is based in explosive plays. And if they don't have that, it's like they're not gonna get far, in my opinion. I mean that is probably the most simple way of saying that. If they're
yeah,
not gonna get 10-yard plays or move the
right.
chains, that they're not gonna get far. But what I'm trying to say.
Yo, absolutely. So, I guess springboarding from the passing offense, let's go to the Packers. I think strength, at least last half season, is the running game. Josh Jacobs and company and Emmanuel Wilson, um, and Chris Brooks too have all been really good the past what 8 9 games, and as much as good as the Eagles defense is, like again they're very good. Um, they're 10th in total yards allowed on the ground with 1771. They have faced just about, or actually 70 more rushing plays than they have passing plays. Allowed
Yep.
9 touchdowns for an average of 4.3 yards per attempt, which is right about middle of the pack. 23, but between 4.3 and 4.6 is a difference of 14 teams. So middle of the pack regard, like for all intents and purposes. But as I talked about the secondary up front, they're still hard. Like Zach Bond, very good linebacker. Jalen Carter, one of the better D tackles in all of football. Jordan Davis, one of the better D tackles in all of football. And then the Kobe Dean, we talked about, is nursing an injury, but I think he was limited. Let me double check.
Yeah.
No, he was full in
Oh,
both.
he's full
Yep,
now.
yeah, he was full both days. And so, like this, the front seven for the Eagles is full of talented players. Like you said, Vic Fangio is still a very good defensive coordinator, and I think where they're going to have to butter their bread this week is on the ground. Pound
Yep.
this game away, take time off the clock, and keep the Pack or the Eagles offense off the field as much as you can. And I think, as I mentioned in the post game for the on the Bears pod, I think what this game is going to come down to is how well of a game Matt LaFleur can call against the Eagles. Because if they can tick clock away by running the ball and getting Jordan Love into a rhythm to where they can just methodically go about their drives, give their defense time to rest, and really execute Jeff Hafley's plan to a T, then I think they'll be in a good position. But if this offense looks stuck in the mud and the running game isn't going anywhere, then I think that's pretty much the recipe for disaster. Um, Notably, we'll talk more about this when we switch to the other side of the ball for both teams. But Josh Jacobs is fifth in the NFL in rushing yards over expected. So breaking a lot of tackles, he has 217. Uh, Foreshadowing Saquon is second with a lot more than that.
Of course.
um, and then the Eagles just like defense in general gets a good amount of sacks. Middle of the pack with 41. They're behind the Packers in that stat, and then they're sixth in the league in turnovers with 26, like equal amount of, um, not literally equal, but a non disproportionate amount of interceptions and fumbles as well. So they're ball hawking, they're forcing turnovers, and they're just an all around talented defense. And so if Josh Jacobs can get going at a better pace than what he did earlier this season. Like first game of the season against the Eagles in Brazil, he goes, I believe, 16 carries for 84 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. Not a
A
bad.
lot of that coming in the second half too.
Yep, a lot of it coming in the second half. If they can get him going early and maintain that momentum throughout the game, I think they'll have like I said, a decent chance to win. But uh, they just got to be smart on how they're utilizing and when they're calling the plays, and can't be telegraphing them too much. Like I think there tends to be a time when Packers play calling gets a little stale, where fans watching at home can kind of tell whoever they're sitting next to or themselves in their head this is going to be a run, and like I know I've done it where it's like it just feels like a running play, and it's probably shouldn't be, and then it is, and they get stopped, and et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, let me double check PFF because I looked when I was doing some research on the pod. Emmanuel Wilson a was pretty darn good from what I saw this year. I believe he was yep, so amongst let me do put a qualifier on minimum running attempts. So of the running backs in the NFL that have had 20% of the 345 max rushing attempts this season, uh, PFF has Emmanuel Wilson as the eighth best runner this season.
Let's go.
Yeah, so
Give him an Emmy.
I will continue taking my victory lap on Emmanuel Wilson. Uh yeah, the only players in terms of PFF run grades, so again, take it with a grain of salt. Um, the only players ahead of him are Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker III, Jameer Gibbs, James Conner, Josh Jacobs, who is fifth, uh,
Hmm.
and then Bucky Irving. So two Packers in the top eight for PFF run
Interesting.
grades. Um, I don't think Chris Brooks has enough qualifiers for this. I'd be curious to know if he's on this list somewhere. But regardless, like just two good running backs and
Yeah.
two guys that when utilized properly can really cause some havoc. And so I'm looking forward to them running the ball and running with efficiency because that I think that's their biggest key to winning the game on offense.
I think too is that we'll know what kind of game that we're in for if based on scripted plays, so 10, 15 plays, like what kind of game does Matt LaFleur want to play? That'll be on display pretty early. And just really it's gonna be how effective are they gonna be if they it's not just the aggressiveness in the play calling, but it's gonna be can they execute? Can they move down the field? Are they gonna be settling for chip shot field goals if they go in the red zone but don't get in the end zone? I think for me, everything's going to be on, under a microscope in terms of decision making, in terms of the kind of X's and O's of like what we value or what we think about what we want to see out of the Packers. But if they get off to a slow start and have to play their way into this game, it's just not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. They can't look at that Cowboys game of just like it felt like a team that knew what they were going to do.
Yep.
It was just so it was so gratifying and emphatic from the moment that they received the ball. Like it was just that kind of game, despite giving eventually 32 points to the Cowboys and
In
kind of us
garbage
being like,
time.
yeah, it was a garbage time, but that kind of feeling. I just think everything's got to be made with a clear mind, and you can't get in the way of like you got to react to the game, but you also can't just like fold at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. So I was curious. I wanted to go back. I wanted to see what this looked like for the Packers. The last year against the Cowboys, they started 12 plays, 75 yards for touchdown. Cowboys punt, Packers punt. Dak throws an interception. Packers scored
Yep.
touchdown 3 plays later, make it 14-0. Uh, Cowboys punt on the ensuing drive. Packers go 10 plays, 93 yards for touchdown. And then the pick six happens. Then touchdown to end the half for the Cowboys 27-7. Obviously, a couple of turnovers in there. Like, first, forcing turnovers is going to be able to help out the defense in a couple minutes. But I think that's just how it has to be. I wouldn't have liked that punt on the second drive, but scoring 3 touchdowns in your first 4 drives, good stuff. And I think that's what's gonna part of what the Packers really, really, really need to focus on um, this game is just ending drives with points. It can be touchdowns, it can be field goals. It just has to finish with points because, according to Pro Football Reference, the Philadelphia Eagles are tied for first in the NFL in percentage of plays in which the opponent's drive ends in a score. The Vikings, the Broncos, and the Eagles are all tied at 31.6%. So less than a third of all of their opponent's drives are ending with any type of score, which is
Yeah,
crazy. Which is crazy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so like we talk
That's
about
good.
like how good the Broncos defense is. Like I think people talk about like this Broncos defense being like one of the best defenses in the NFL. The Eagles are right up there in terms of how little teams are scoring against them. And so it's it's tough. Like if you just have to get some sort of points, and I don't want to speak too soon because I know it'll bite me if I say just kick field goals. Like if you're getting field goals, that's at least points, right? But if they're in the red zone, they have to capitalize on touchdowns. I think that's just non-negotiable, non-negotiable, because if you've done the work to drive 60 yards to get to the red zone, you just have to pay it off. And
Yeah,
obviously, offense gets a little mucky in the red zone just because that's just how it be. But you just have to. It's the playoffs. Like that is a do or die situation, and the Packers just have to do it in order to move on because kicking field goals against an offense like the Eagles have probably doesn't cut it this game. Unless for some reason you get an absolute stinker from Hurst and Saquon and etc. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that'll be it. If they can call a good game plan and have an equal success in running and passing the ball, that'll be good. Like they can't rely all on Jordan Love. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea to rely all on Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. I don't think it's I neither of those are good ideas. And so long as Matt LaFleur calls like one of his best games, I think they have a good chance at being competitive in this game as long as they finish out drives.
Agreed.
So let's move on to the other side of the ball, Packers defense and the Eagles offense. Eagles offense, much like their defense, very good, Jordan.
Pretty good. There is one, we'll get into it, but there is one stat that kind of surprised me now that I'm seeing it
Do
that
you
I would
want to
not have.
do you want to just drop it?
Yeah, so I mean, they clearly have playmakers. Jalen Hurts, MVP level candidate 2 years ago. Very good quarterback
And
still.
and this year.
And this year, yeah, yeah. I think Saquon coming in is,
Oh, I thought you said Saquon. My apologies.
did I say Saquon?
I
Or
You might have. I'm looking at Saquon's
I meant
ESPN page, so I think I might have. My brain might have did a whole thing.
I meant Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
But Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, of course, Dallas Goedert, fine. I would say at least like middle of the road, if not above average tight end in the league.
I'd say he's like 8.
Eight, yeah, eight's a good, yeah.
Yeah,
Passing yards per game, they are ranked 29th with an average of 187 yards per game.
that's crazy.
And maybe that is just the Saquon effect of like they just run the ball so damn well that it doesn't
Yeah,
really matter. But
I'd be curious to know. Let me check their schedule real quick. I want to see how many times they threw with Kenny Pickett and company the last couple of weeks. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because like,
yeah,
I
I
mean, I
forgot
mean,
that
I mean,
that
honestly,
that
not
will
really.
inform that too.
Because like Kenny Pickett was their leading passer in the Commanders game and the Dallas game at 143 yards each game. Like that's not an average. He just had that each game. But then Tanner McKee threw 269 last week. I mean, I think you're right. Like there's a couple of stinkers here that I shouldn't say stinkers. There's games by Jalen Hurts where he needed to throw the ball that much. He threw for 114 yards against the Giants in Week 7. He threw for 179 against the Rams in Week 12, 118 against Baltimore in Week 13, 108 against the Panthers in Week 14. Like, yeah, there's times where they just don't need to throw the ball like that.
I I'm not gonna get sucked into that because I think the Brazil game was kind of example number one of Jalen Hurts can do plenty of damage. We saw how that Devontae Smith and AJ Brown tore up the Packers secondary, and that was at full strength because Jair Alexander was playing that game. It does maybe give a little bit of optimism of being able to take advantage of a passing offense that, as much as we are frustrated by the Packers, I'm sure a lot of Eagles fans are like, why does this not look better? Or maybe it's the fact that Saquon's been so good that a lot of it just kind of falls by the wayside. But I do think, you know, we'll see. We'll see there. You mean,
I think it's definitely a we'll see moment. Um, but it doesn't mean like I'm definitely still. I don't want to say scared, poopless to keep this pod not explicit. But I mean, Jalen Hurts is still good. AJ Brown is still good, and they're just they're dynamic players. Um, Curiously enough, they don't really throw down the field that often. Like they don't really have one of those guys like Devonta Smith and AJ Brown are both talented receivers, and so they can both go get balls down the field. But as I mentioned when we talked about the Packers receivers, Christian Watson had 15 targets down the field. Or I'm sorry, he has more than that. But AJ Brown is 42nd in the league at 15 targets for 20 yards down the field. Devonta Smith is 58th at 12, and then Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Dante Wicks, and Jeremy all have more than 15 or more. So they've all had as many targets as AJ Brown has just down the field. And so 15 isn't too bad for an 18 game season or 17 game season. Like that's just one a game or so ish. One, only missing two in there. And so he's still a threat to be. He's still a threat down the field. He's a talented receiver. He can catch any ball anywhere on the field.
yeah,
But I think that's something to look out for is that maybe Xavier McKinney isn't that big of a factor this game because they're just not throwing it down there. They're just not throwing it towards where Xavier McKinney is because they just don't throw it that far that throw it that far downfield that often to where Xavier McKinney can impact the play. And so I thought that was a pretty peculiar stat that this offense is so good, but they're just doing it all either behind the line of scrimmage or over the middle or in the 10 to 15 yard range. Like it's nothing really deep. It's just an efficient offense, which it doesn't surprise me given Saquon Barkley's prowess.
very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it was something I was surprised by because like I was thinking about teams that have like a Chris Watson type guy, and they really don't. Like they don't really have a burner. Like Devonta Smith is kind of that. He's real fast, real twitchy,
He
but he's
he's
not.
honest. Yeah,
But he's just not like that guy. I think they use him differently than a go route runner, and they use him
yeah.
more as like quick slant guy or bubble screens and things like that.
Obviously, I would agree. I think this is going to be an interesting game for Xavier McKinney. Is he going to be, you know, the single high safety kind of archetype that Jeff Hafley has really like built into this defense and that we all saw coming when they hired him in the first place?
Yep.
Is he gonna just be out of the field of play? When targets are being thrown, are they gonna deliberately try to avoid him that way and just beat him up, beat this defense on like underneath routes, put a lot of pressure on the likes of Edgerrin Cooper, Quay Walker, if he, depending on how much he plays, Eric Wilson, like the middle of the defense is unsurprisingly, that is where, you know, it's gonna be up the spine. That's the big thing of where it is. But I think where Xavier McKinney is placed on the field, are they going to be suckered into what if the Eagles just come into with a game plan that they abandon like this kind of short, quick passing game that gets the ball to their receivers and then let them do work kind of thing, eat, as they say, and then just kind of like try to bomb it and catch the Packers off guard. That's where, you know, tendencies can be thrown out the window if it's a single playoff game and you're do or die, you're trying to win to live another day kind of thing. That seems like a lot of foresight than I think Nick Sirianni and company will probably do. You know, uh, I don't know, but it's just a matter of your most impactful, your biggest difference maker on defense, the big high prize free agent safety. If he's in the range of the field where he can make plays, he can, maybe it's generating turnovers or it's just breaking up passes and shutting down drives. We'll take one of either one. But I think that's where a game like the Vikings, I just, the images of Xavier McKinney being in those zones and they found the ways to get the ball like 5, 10 yards before he's, within the range of like making a tackle or making a play on the ball. Like you don't want that. You don't want that recipe at all.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Um, while you were talking, I was looking up average depth of target for these guys for the QBs. Jalen Hurts is 15th in the league at 8.4 yards average depth of target. For context, that puts him in the realm of quarterbacks like Aiden O'Connell, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, C.J. Stroud are all in this kind of area. Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford are all in this kind of low eight range. Um, Top of the list is Anthony Richardson at 12.3 yards, which is crazy. Then it drops off a bit to the nines, I'll call them. Everybody with nine or higher includes. I'm sorry, we'll go 9.2 and higher because that's where Jordan Love is. Sam Darnold, Jordan Love, Joe Flacco in 7 games for Indy. Lamar Jackson, Jameis Winston, Trevor Lawrence all have 9.2 yards average of the target or more. So doesn't really mean like a lot individually. You think 9 yards versus 8.5 yards isn't that big of a difference, but I think over the course of the season, given that it's an average, says a lot. That I think there's a lot of short, quick passes for Jalen Hurts that they do um, to make this offense go, especially dumping it off to Saquon at some point, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
that out in the flat, and so it'll be important for the secondary and Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes to really have like to be able to stay with these guys and make good tackles. Keyshawn Nixon out on the edge, like we've seen Keyshawn Nixon and Evan Williams do a really good job this year at making plays on bubble screens and making tackles behind the line of scrimmage when they're getting off blocks out there or something. Like that's another thing you need to watch out for in this game is just those guys being able to get off those blocks and make those special type of plays for negative plays. If that happens, good things are happening for the Packers. But the AJ Brown is just so strong and he's a talented receiver. I'd imagine it's going to be Keyshawn or Carrington Valentine covering him. And honestly, like, good luck to you both, buddies. Like,
Yep.
you guys are going to need to be at the top of your game to be able to stop him. And so, here's to hoping that's how it works and that's how it works out and everything. But it's going to be it's a tough matchup for sure for both of them. And even then, like, I don't want Eric Stokes on Devonta Smith. Like, I think he probably gets cooked just because Devonta Smith is so fast and Eric Stokes' speed has really fallen off since his injuries, and so it's just a lot of guys to cover. It's a lot of guys to cover.
Yeah. It's again, it was already a problem week one, and you had Jair, you had pretty much a full
They
strength
had everybody.
defense.
They had
They had
everybody.
everybody.
Yeah,
And yeah, I that's where it's gonna be a challenge. It's gonna be no matter who it's the playoffs. These are the best teams in the league, best teams in the conference. The Eagles are just a really interesting team. They're very similar like the Vikings where they got playmakers. They have guys that can uh threaten you behind the line of scrimmage in quick bursts down the field. Like it commands your attention across the field, like no matter what the situation is, and that's just a hard game to live up to.
yeah, absolutely. like it's hard. Like this game is going to be
And we
hard.
haven't talked about Saquon.
No, it's which is crazy.
That's yeah.
And so I guess let's talk about Saquon. Um, as I go back to my foreshadowing stat venture, um, Saquon second in the NFL at rushing yards over expected at 549, only behind Derrick Henry at 562. Tackling in this game is going to be so critically important. You have to wrap up Saquon, which I know is easier said than done. It's my bugaboo is tackling and arm tackling and not wrapping up. So I'll be the first to identify it. Um, I mean, if they can keep him under wraps, that'll be mission critical. Like I think if they keep Saquon in check, that they'll be in for a good game. If they can keep Saquon under 100 yards total from scrimmage, I think there's a good chance they've won this game. But one of the guys that will probably be my guy to watch for when we do that at the end is Devontae Wyatt. Um, he's sixth in the NFL among interior defensive linemen with the qualified snaps, uh, minimum snaps qualifier that I had earlier, 20% of the most snaps played in the league. Um, but he leads. He's sixth in stop percentage, which is PFF's metric of a bad play for a defense or for an offense at 10.9% in 107 snaps of rushing defense. So when he's in there, he's a pretty darn good rush defender. He's getting good stops. He's like always clogging the backfield. I think he's gotten better this year. I think he's had quietly a breakout year solely because he's been injured a couple times, and so he hasn't been able to like stack success in ways that us and media members can really identify throughout, kind of thing. And so if he can be a force this game, that'll be a big plus for them. And same with Kenny Clark. Like I think this is a game where you just need Kenny Clark to show up. He's been quiet all year long, and so it's hard being a nose tackle and being an interior defensive lineman.
Yep.
You don't get a whole lot of glamour when you're a premier uh the premier guy on the line. You get doubled the whole lot, and it's just hard to do your job as if you're not one of like the best ever. And so with that being said, like I think those two guys are going to be critically important to stopping Saquon. I think the other guy, and I shout out Dan Orlovsky, he talked about this on TV today. It's a good point. He said if the Packers want to win, they need Edgerrin Cooper to play like the best linebacker in the NFL.
Oh, yes,
And
100%.
if Edgerrin Cooper can play like the next linebacker to grace the NFL with his presence, that'll be huge for them. His side to side speed has been vastly improved onto what I thought it would have been coming out of the draft, and he's been so good the past month and a half. He just won the NFL's December and January Defensive Player of the year or the month, I think, for the NFC. And so if Edger Cooper can really play and hold Saquon to some minimal yardage, especially outside the tackles, that'll be huge for this defense, man. Not to
Yep.
mention if Quay Walker does play and if he picks up right where he left off, which I hope he does if he does play, that's two dynamic linebackers, man. Like that's two linebackers with abilities that we've like been begging to see playing against two like one of the better rushers in the NFL. And so we've talked about it ad nauseum on this pod that the Packers have played well against backs that are like okay and whatnot, but they've kind of gotten a bit burned by good running backs. This is the chance to do that again. Play really good against a good running back, and this defense I think will be set put in a place for success coming out of this season into next, and even into next week if they do end up winning.
Um, Only three games where Saquon Barkley did not have over 100 yards from scrimmage. So obviously not just rushing, but also counting for his receiving impact. The game against the Packers, he had three touchdowns. That was the most that he had in a game all season. Kind of notable for that. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Edric Cooper is probably you know, we'll see who goes first for players to watch, but easily the biggest candidate on defense, if not Xavier McKinney. Like those two are just so important. Again, middle of the field. It's not just what you can do about in coverage, stepping back and dropping into zone. It's about, can you diagnose running plays? Can you break through that whatever front that the Eagles are going to put up through their blocking? Like, just it's going to be really hard that way. But yeah, I think you're hitting on a point of like this Eagles offensive line. Saquon Barkley doesn't get over 2,000 rushing yards without a really good front five. And for all the kind of changes that they made, like this is still a team that knows how to get solid running lanes, how to make an explosive, a machine go for this running, for the running style that they really kind of revived with Saquon Barkley. Um, and I think that's where you mentioned like Wyatt, Clark are going to be really important. Who pops off the edge? Can they make plays if the Eagles are just going to feed Saquon Barkley? I don't know. It would just be a shame. I think part it obviously goes hand in hand that if you know the front four is getting pancaked and it's putting a lot of pressure on Edgerrin Cooper to find how do you break through that wall.
Yeah,
Like that could be where we see these ugly old Packers poor tackling history in playoff games when it comes to a team that knows how to run the ball and just push it down your throat. I think that's where I get worried about being able to win the trenches, winning the game at the line of scrimmage.
yeah. No, I'm right there with you, 100%, 100%. Like they just have to win the trenches, and again, on both sides of the ball this game
Yep.
to have a chance, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Because what do you do when when Saquon has 2,000 yards on a season and is such a dynamic piece coming out of the backfield receiving the ball? And so the only way to do that is to pressure Jalen Hurts and get home and get a couple sacks to make their life hell and ruin drives. Like if Rashawn Gary can get a sack or two this Sunday, that'll be great. And like if Brenton Cox Jr. can build on the momentum he's built over the past couple weeks, same with Aaron Mosby, honestly, go for it. Like even Kingsley Anibare, like go for it. Get home and make Jalen Hurts' life difficult. And I think the biggest thing too is again, Edgerrin Cooper for sure, and if Quay plays, have to be able to keep Jalen Hurts contained. Can't let him run all over you. They did a good job of doing that in the first game. It's up to Jeff Halfley to make sure that that doesn't get replicated. Uh, that success does get replicated this week.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. Anything else you want to talk about, Jordan, or should we get into what to watch for and score predictions?
I think we have to. The
Alrighty.
bell is tolling. Got to make our big decisions.
Alrighty. You can go first for players to watch.
I will go Edgerrin Cooper.
All right.
He really emerged as probably the biggest difference maker on defense by the end of the season. Like that's not to diminish Xavier McKinney and his early season contributions, but I think Edgerrin Cooper's emergence late in the year kind of it spelled something good for this defense that amid questions within their secondary and the outside corner position, like having someone, and obviously Quay Walker going down. I think Edgerrin Cooper coming back from his hamstring injury and showing no signs of rust and playing as good as he has. It's not been perfect, but that's where, if he can build on the momentum that he has had at the end of the season and really come into this game and just play lights out, like that's where I feel the most optimistic with this team, weirdly, is that the defense is far from perfect. I'm scared as hell against the wide receiver corps of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith against, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes. But someone like Edgerrin Cooper, I think between his ability to get after the quarterback, blitz, his coverage skills can come and go and will certainly be tested on Sunday. I just think he plays with a ferocity and just kind of this. everything just comes so natural to him that I think it won't be above him in a in his first NFL playoff game.
No, I sure hope not. Like I think it's such a he's such a crucial part of this defense, and then if he could rise to the occasion, that'll be great. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Um, my Packer is Devontae Wyatt, as I've already mentioned. Want to see him stuffing plays inside, make Saquon bounce outside. Not that he's bad out there, but just that gives him a better chance to hopefully get some TFLs and get Edgerrin Cooper in the mix over there. Um, and just get home. Like he had a couple. He's been good at getting the quarterback, etc. And just not finishing sacks. We'll love to see him finish a sack this game. And I think he's one of their. I don't want to be definitively their best players on the line, but I think it's pretty darn close.
I mean, outside of the injuries, he was playing at such a high level. Like I think he was probably the best defensive lineman this year.
I think so too, but I have a hard time definitively saying that when he
Mhm.
wasn't there the entire time. Like Carl Brooks is pretty good. Kenny Clark
Yeah,
is
yeah.
quietly good. Like it's hard.
He
I think Devontae Wyatt
it was
is closer to one than people think, but I think he's up there.
the fact that we can point to his absence being a bigger issue than we realize. I think that kind of helps his case. But
Yeah, absolutely.
that'll be a discussion for off-season grades when,
Yep,
weeks after this.
yep. My Eagle is AJ Brown. Like I think he's one of the best receivers in the NFL, and whoever the Packers throw at him for this one is going to be critical, and keeping him in check will be also mission critical. Because like if they let Saquon beat him, Saquon goes for like a buck 50 and 3 touchdowns. So be it. That's just the nature of having one of the best running backs in the NFL. But I'd feel worse, I think, if we got torched by their receivers, just because it feels worse because that's the biggest weakness the Packers have on defense is that secondary. So yeah, AJ Brown's my eagle.
Hmm. A lot of good candidates, especially offensively. Defensively, it's just they're kind of all together as a unit that it's hard to pick just one defender. I think probably I'm just gonna go Saquon. It's kind of the most obvious, most glaring, but this Packers team can defend the run well. Yet I think we're so scarred by playoff losses of someone like Raheem Mostert having over 200 rushing yards in the conference championship game against the 49ers
Yeah,
5 years ago, or however long it was. Like people of lesser talent and of not lesser ability, but have really gotten the better of the Packers for years. And I'm not trying to just carry that into a game where this is Jeff Hafley's first playoff game as Packers defensive coordinator. But, you know, I would hate for us to be like, hey, they really improved against the run. Like they really, over the course of the season, it became a true strength to this defense. And then you play one playoff game and Saquon, gets over 150 rushing yards or 200 yards from scrimmage, and they don't know what to do with that. Like that's where I think if something like that were to happen, it re-examines what you think is a strength of their defense and how you build the second year of this program specifically under Hafley. That I just don't want to take one step forward and then play a playoff game and take 4 steps back because they can't repeat that again. They can't have that. And a lot of it just might just come down to Saquon Barkley's a really good NFL player. But, that's why if you make the playoffs, you're going to play really good playoff or you're gonna play really good teams that they're gonna have really good players. That's what it just comes down to. You muted.
Absolutely, exactly. That's the third time tonight.
Turkey,
That's that. That's
turkey.
that's nuts. All right, score predictions. Um, I will go first since you went first for players. Uh, One of the few games this year that I am unfortunately picking the Packers to lose. Uh, I think that this Eagles team is just so good that it's hard to find any weakness that Packers can exploit. Packers haven't been on top of their game. They lose Christian Watson. They're not at 100%. They haven't been playing well on offense, coming off of a loss to the Bears. Uh, I don't know. Probably, I'd say the Eagles 34, Packers 17. I don't think it's gonna be particularly close. Packers on the road. It's just it hurts me to say that, but I'm not the most optimistic for the game this week. I think it's gonna be a good game. I just think that the Packers don't have enough firepower to stick with the Eagles right now. Even though they did week 1 in Brazil. Like I think they have a chance. It's just that I think everything has to fall in the right place for them to win, and they haven't had 4 good quarters to showcase that this year.
I'm too going against the Packers. I'm gonna say Eagles 28, Packers 16. It's hard to find uh, a weakness in their overall kind of profile. And the Packers, you mentioned it. This team is not. They just have not been playing well. They're not indicative of a team that finished the season 12-5. And yes, they are the seventh seed in a really good NFC and specifically a good NFC North. But I just think, I would hate for the season to end on Sunday. Obviously, this podcast is a lot more fun when the Packers, get a surprise playoff victory and we're overjoyed and we can view that as like this is the next benchmark in this overall development of this Packers team. But I can't just talk myself into overlooking the last few weeks of games. And it's not just the fact that they lost their last two games, it's the way that they won the game against the Saints where it was convincing, but because the Saints were crap and someone had to win that game by a lot. It's just there hasn't been something right with this team basically since that Thanksgiving basically since Josh Jacobs went into the locker room holding that huge ass turkey and we're all just kind of like a little chafed. You know what I mean? Like the confidence meter has steadily gone down. I think Watson's injury, Jair trying to make it back. I don't want to we're not writing the autopsy right now, but it's just there's not the vibes around this team are probably the most uncertain they have been all year. I mean, the fact you mentioned it way earlier in the pod, and I don't think we even really talked about it after the Bears game, but they had a players meeting. They had like
Yeah,
they were airing out frustrations after that loss. Like that's not what you want. Like that when we're talking about flipping the switch for a team that was generally good for
yeah,
most of the year. What are you talking? Where are we? We're losing the plot here. That's where my alarm bells are right now.
yeah. I'm totally with you. Totally with you. So, all right, folks, that does it for us. Packers play 3:30 on Sunday. Keep an eye out for that. Go watch it,
Is
obviously.
this a is this a Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady, Aaron Andrews special?
I think so.
It's kind of
That's
their window.
that's the game. Like that's the
The GOTW.
I don't want to call it that for sure, but it's the Fox game on Sunday. So I doubt they'd put Kevin Burkhardt and uh, Tom Brady on Saturday. So I'd imagine it's
If
gonna be.
if they have that game too, because everybody's getting a piece of the playoff pie.
Oh yeah, then yeah.
Literally
Well yeah, because
every
it's prime is the Ravens game, I forget who's.
ESPN gets Vikings, Rams,
Oh yeah, yep. And then
NBC,
gets
you
Sunday
know,
night. CBS gets
Sunday morning.
Sunday afternoon. Yeah, Sunday at noon. Who's the other one? Who's the last? Now I'm curious. Look at the schedule, Jordan. What do we got?
I'm
Also,
looking.
also Notre Dame just won. Kicked a field goal to end it.
Good for them.
Sure.
Those Irish keep those.
Those Irish keep fighting, huh?
That's what they do.
Uh, CBS gets two. Is how that works. CBS
Oh,
gets the 3:30 Saturday game and the noon Sunday game. But either which way, go check it out. Check out all things GSPN at gspn.info, where you can find all of our pods ad free if you are a subscriber to the premium Substack for only $8 a month, as well as the GSPN After Dark video series, which was a lot of fun. Jordan, Andrew, and I talked uh, playoff previews for the entire NFL on this week's episode, so go check that out if you're a subscriber. All things Bucks over at Eurostep and Win in Six. Um, Jordan just did a mailbag with Adam, I believe, was that recorded today?
that was recorded today. That will probably it's already up if you are listening to this right now.
Perfect. So then go check out All Things Brewers with Adam and Andrew as well over at Cruising for a Bruising. Uh, I'm before you even think about saying it, we're not going to worry about it. And then All Things,
Arbitration.
it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
I know.
And then All
I
Things
know.
Movies ahead of Oscar season with Make Time for This with Adam and Andrew as well. So all right, folks, that does it for this episode of Talk of the Tundra. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in your podcast feeds for all likelihood Monday morning. So be on the lookout for us there. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.